Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear students, hope you're doing well by Allah's blessings and mercy. At the beginning of this class, I would like you to look at the screen and imagine that you were standing at the path 4. You were standing right here in the middle where two roads move into two different directions. So imagine yourself that you were lost in this forest and only one road will lead you out of the forest, right? So when you are in this, when sometimes we are in this situation, we become confused. Robert Frost, the famous American poet, says, "Two roads diverged in a wood and I took the one less traveled by." Oftentimes in our life, we are faced with choosing two or more than two options, right? When you go shopping, what happens? Sometimes you're confused. Shall I take the red one or the orange one? Shall I take option A or option B or option C? Sometimes things can be more serious than that. Sometimes it so happens that a ship is sinking down. A man was on the ship and he was trying to save his parents. But the situation is he has the ability to save only one, either his father or his mother. So who is he going to save? Sometimes we are faced with this kind of dilemma, with this kind of choices, and we are confused what to do. And today we are going to read chapter 19, from chapter 19 to 23, 5 chapters. And in these chapters you will find that characters will face this kind of dilemma, or what should I say, they will have difficulty in choosing options, in choosing or coming to good decisions that will lead them so far. So, in the last chapter, they were 10,000 feet below the sea level. In chapter 19, they are, I maybe forgot to tell you that when they were making this journey, when they reached the bottom of the chimney, they were faced with two roads, right? And they didn't know which one would lead you, or which one would lead them to the center of the earth. The professor, without thinking twice, without a second thought, and without any good reasons or evidence, he chose the right one, and he was moving towards that path. But after a while, the narrator recognized that they were not actually going downwards, they were actually moving upwards. He informed the professor, but the professor didn't listen to him. So, on one hand, the narrator was disturbed that his uncle was not listening, but on the other hand, he was also happy. And look at the description of how he describes his feelings, or expresses his feelings. He said, "Besides, if the upward path was becoming increasingly tiring, I consoled myself." Console means to make yourself feel better. So I consoled myself with the thought that it was bringing me nearer to the surface. This was a hope which every step confirmed, and I rejoiced at the thought of seeing my little Robin again. So, on one hand, he was disturbed, right, that we are on the wrong path. On the other hand, he was inwardly happy that our journey should not be, what should I say, to the center of the earth. Our journey should be to the surface of the earth, right? So when they were in the chimney, when they were moving or following that road, the other road, the narrator noticed some primitive plants, and when he saw the primitive plants, he came to a conclusion that if you go downwards and if you go downwards, you will find or discover the lava, not plants, not primitive plants. But he discovered primitive plants, and he, showed his uncle these primitive plants, and he gave his conclusion that these plants suggest that we are not actually going downward, we are actually going upward. And the professor didn't listen to him, right? He didn't pay any heed to whatever the narrator had to say. So the narrator was confused. Why is he refusing me? And look at the screen. It says, "Had he understood me or not? Was he refusing out of avuncular or scientific vanity to admit that he had made a mistake in choosing the eastern tunnel? Or was he determined to explore this passage to the end? So avuncular means, out of the relationship that he is my uncle, or scientific vanity, or the pride that he is a scientist. So the narrator is confused. Why is my uncle refusing me? Is it because of the pride that he is a scientist and he is my uncle? How dare you correct me? How dare you say I've made a mistake? Is it because of this pride? Or is it because he is determined to explore, or he is determined to see the end of this passage? So this reveals a kind of feature of the professor, right? The professor is shown or given the evidence that they are on the wrong path, but he didn't listen to the arguments. He kept going. He kept moving on. Now, if I ask you to choose one out of these two, the narrator's options, what would you choose? Is he refusing because he is proud of his position, he's a scientist and his uncle, elderly person, or because he wanted to see the end? You shall discover what his nature was or what his intention was later. So when they were moving into that path, they discovered a number of earlier plants, earlier species. Look at the screen. He said, I noticed remains of a more advanced order of creatures in which paleontologists have detected the earliest reptile forms. The Devonian seas were inhabited by a vast number of creatures of this species. It was becoming obvious that we were climbing the ladder of animal life on which man occupies the highest rung. Now, paleontologist means people who study fossil records, people who study ancient plants, they study ancient bones and shells that are preserved in rocks. So people who study fossils, you can say these people are paleontologists. And then it says the Devonian seas were inhabited. Inhabited means lived. The seas were lived by this species. And then it says, we were climbing the ladder of animal life on which man occupies the highest rung. Rung is the topmost bar of a ladder. So we are on the topmost bar of the ladder. In order to understand this passage, you need to understand a theory called evolution theory, which was propagated by a scientist called Charles Darwin. And this theory suggests that the first form of life was a bacteria, and they give it a name. Let's say the name is amoeba, and this was a unicellular organism. From this unicellular organism, through mutation and through millions of years of evolution, came out multicellular organisms. And can you look at the screen once again? These fishes, these were once fishes, and through millions of years of evolution, they became amphibians, and then they became, what should I say, animals that live on the surface, and then finally came the advanced form of human beings. So Jules Verne, the writer, seems to be suggesting this theory, and when you read this novel, you will find that the narrator and the professor, they will use this theory in order to explain certain things, in order to explain the phenomena that they will discover at the center of the earth. But see, I don't want to talk about this theory right now, because after we finish the novel, I will give 1 or 2 classes explaining this theory, and it's not possible to do that in 15 minutes as well. So just to tell you what should I say, bottom line is that the Quran has clearly stated that Adam alayhi salam was created, right? And from Adam came the rest of the human beings. So their idea is that human beings were evolved from another species. Humans and apes, they were evolved from a common ancestor like chimpanzee, was not actually supported by the Quran. Secondly, this theory has a lot of questions, and if you can't answer these questions, if these questions go unanswered, then the whole theory collapses. So we will discuss about this theory after we finish the novel. Right now, let's not interrupt the flow of the story. So after that, they found they were in a cavern. That's how the cavern looks, and it was 100 feet high and 150 feet wide. It was a huge cavern, and the narrator was certain that it cannot be dug by any human. So after that cavern, they reached a wall, right? And they were surrounded by the walls actually. So they realized instantly that we reached at a dead end. So you can go farther. So look at the, what should I say, reaction of the professor. The professor, after making this mistake, he was supposed to be ashamed. He was supposed to be, nervous, but he's not nervous at all. He's saying, okay, now we are certain that we are not on the path of Arne Muslim. We are on the wrong path. So he's saying, let us take a night's rest, and in less than 3 days, we shall be back at the place where the paths fork. When you use this phrase, the paths fork, what it means is that the paths divide into separate directions. So let us take a night's rest, and we shall be back at the place where the paths fork in 3 days, or less than 3 days. The narrator is saying, yes, if we have strength, and why shouldn't we? Asks the professor. The narrator says, because tomorrow we shall have no water left. The professor says, and no courage either. So far we discovered two features of the professor. He made a mistake, he didn't listen to the narrator out of maybe the pride, or maybe he wanted to discover the end of the passage. We don't know. But here, after it was certain that he made a mistake, he was not nervous. He was not ashamed of making a mistake. Rather, he is confident that in less than 3 days, we will reach the fork, and then we will make our journey through the other way. And then, in the next chapter, the narrator was not only the narrator, even the other characters, the professor, Hans, all of them were exhausted. They didn't have any water left. All the flasks were empty, right? And the narrator was feeling exhausted. He fell down like a mouse. And then the situation was kind of like this, that if he didn't get a mouthful of water, he would die. So at that moment, the professor came, and he gave him a mouthful of water out of his flask. And look at how the narrator feels when he drinks a mouthful of water. He says, oh, what bliss I knew at that moment. A mouthful of water slaked my burning thirst. Just one mouthful, but it was enough to recall the life which was ebbing away from me. So a mouthful of water slaked my burning thirst. Slake someone's thirst means to drink until you're no longer thirsty. So just one mouthful of water was enough to save his life, which was ebbing away. Ebbing away means which was dying slowly, right? To ebb away means to die slowly. And then the professor said, yes, a mouthful of water, but it's the last, you understand? The very last. I had kept it carefully at the bottom of my flask, resisting a score of times the terrible temptation to drink it. But no, Ansel, I kept it for you. Number one, the professor resisted his own temptation, and he uses this hyperbole a score of times. A score of times means 20 times. So he didn't count 20 times. It's kind of, hyperbole, exaggerating, right? So the professor resisted his temptation to drink the last mouthful of water a score of times. Number two, it shows the professor's love for his nephew. Generally, people say that people who are scientists, they just understand the laws of physics and nothing else. They don't understand the feelings or emotions of other human beings or fellow feelings. But here, the professor seems to be different. He seems to understand, and he seems to show his love for his nephew. Alright. So the narrator was saying that, okay, now I regain my strength, and it is quite clear that we don't have any water, any stream, any source of water around us. So let's go back, let's stop this journey, seize this journey right here, and let's go back. That's all, that's enough. But the professor was, as you know, he was a crazy character. He said, you and Hans, you live, but I will continue my journey and I will reach the center of the earth. If it takes my life, I'm going to do that. But you and the guide, just leave me alone. So the narrator was now in, you see, kind of dilemma. Which one shall I choose? Shall I stay with my uncle or shall I save my life? Look at his dilemma. He said his voice, the professor's voice, which had been gentle and affectionate for a moment, had become hard and threatening again. He was fighting with somber determination. Somber means serious. He was fighting with serious determination against the impossible, and I could not bear to abandon him at the bottom of the abyss. But on the other hand, the instinct, the natural tendency of self-preservation, protecting me, saving me, urged me to leave him. So the narrator was in a kind of dilemma. Shall I stay with my uncle? Right? Because he is in this terrible condition, in this abyss, great deep hole, or shall I save myself and leave this place? It's really difficult to, what should I say, judge or make the right decision. But then the professor, he gave a sort of inspiring speech, right? He says, when Columbus asked his crews for 3 days more to reach land, those crews, sick and terrified though they were, granted his request. He discovered the new world. I am the Columbus of these subterranean regions, and I'm asking you for only 1 day more. So who was Columbus? Christopher Columbus was a traveler who discovered, according to the European writers, he discovered North America. But if you read the history, you will see that the Muslims discovered America long ago. So according to the European writers, it was Christopher Columbus who discovered America, and they used to call it the New World. So the professor is saying that Columbus, when they reached a point of time that they could go no further, they were not finding any places, new places, any new civilizations. They were disheartened, they were depressed. But he asked his crews for 3 more days, and they accepted. Similarly, I am the Columbus of this, under the surface, and I'm asking for 1 more day. So all of them agreed, even the narrator agreed, okay, 1 more day, then after all, we will, what should I say, cease our journey and we will go back. So, again, the journey was taking place and 1 day passed by, and there was no sources of water, and again, all the characters were exhausted. They were crawling on their knees, and all of a sudden, the narrator just collapsed. He just became senseless. So when he became senseless, he found that Hans was moving from here to there, and afterwards he came with the good news that he found a torrent. A torrent is a powerful flow of water. So everybody was excited. They were searching for that torrent, but soon they discovered that Hans actually didn't discover the torrent. He just heard the noise, the sound of the torrent. So Hans was looking for the torrent, the place where he could find the torrent. Hans pressed, can you look at the screen? Can you look at the screen? He pressed his ear against the dry stone and moved it slowly to and from here to there, listening very attentively. I realized that he was trying to find the exact spot where the noise of the torrent was loudest. He found that spot 3 feet up from the floor. I saw him seize his pickaxe and attack the rock. Right, so he took the pickaxe, attacked the rock, and they found the flow of water, and they survived. So that's how the chapter ends. In your homework, can you complete the worksheet? And that's all for today. Just a little fight.